Hello and welcome to my channel. This is part of the Halloween collaboration with Mini Scenes GB and Crafty YouTubers United. This week I'm going to use a Let's Resin mould that I bought from Amazon. The mould makes a pear jar. So it comes with a nice base and then a little lid. But I don't want to use the lid, I just want to use the base. And Let's Resin mark the side of their moulds with the amount. This says it takes 11 fluid ounces, but I've measured it with water so that I can get grams, and it came out at 320. And now I'm on the Elichem website, on the Aqua Cast page, and I'm going to put 320 into their calculator. It says I need 424 powder and 151 or 152 water. So I'm just going to measure out my powder, add my water and mix it up. I'm going to wear a mask because the powder is very flyaway, just a dust mask. And then I will measure out the powder and the water according to the results from the calculator. I like to add the powder to the water and then just give it a good mix and push against the sides, try and get rid of any lumps. It does mix really well, and then I'll be ready to pour it into my mould. So I'm going to pour it in a little bit at a time, and then I will squeeze around the bottom of the mould just to make sure that there are no bubbles stuck down there, and I'll keep topping it up until it's full. I over poured it a little bit, so I just used a tissue to take some of it out. And some more tapping just to release any of the bubbles. I have this hexagon pendant type mould, and I'm going to use it to create a hole in the bottom of the pot because I want to use it as a flower pot later on. So I'm just going to stand it up so that it touches the bottom, and it will displace some of the Aqua Cast and hopefully make a hole. And then I'm going to leave it to set, and I'll leave it for a couple of hours. Okay, it's completely set now, so let's see if I can remove this hexagon. It's just left a thin film of the Aqua Cast behind, which I should be able to pop out. So I'm going to go ahead and try and demould the rest of it. It is a little bit tricky, but you can see how stretchy the silicone is, and once you get it past a certain point you can easily roll it back and then just twist the centre out. And it's easy to remove the thin layer that's in the hole, just poke it and it falls out. So I've got some bubbles along the edge here, and I'm just going to sand those down while this is still soft, and it will help to smooth it out and fill it in. It's going to receive a cover of paint anyway. I have some Das air dry clay, and I keep it in 2 bags to make sure that it's completely airtight, and that keeps it fresh. So I need to take out a chunk, and this stuff dries quite quickly, so I'm going to make sure that I put it back in at least 1 bag and make sure it's folded over. To make sure that the clay stays nice and damp, I have a wet baby wipe, and I'm going to wrap any clay that I'm not using at the moment in that baby wipe, and this makes sure that it doesn't dry out. To make the clay workable, you need to condition it, which is basically just kneading it. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going to use a rolling pin to roll it out, and I want to make it the same thickness as the rim of the pot. That looks about right. So now I need to cut some triangles. It cuts really easily, so I'm just using this plastic palette knife. I need two, so I'll take measurements from the other one. I'm just going to squirt a little bit of water onto my silicone mat and smooth the edges. My pot has just come out of the mould, so it is still damp, but I'm going to dampen the top rim and then I'm going to attach these triangles to it. I'm just using my fingers and thumb to press and pull down the clay so that it goes over the surface of the pot. I'm smoothing it out with my nail, and you can add some more water to it. Don't worry if it's too lumpy, it hasn't got to be completely smooth. You can sand it once it's dry. And I'll do the same for the other one. Adding some water just to smooth out any lumps and bumps. I have a piece of paper and I'm going to lay my pot on top of it, and then I'm just going to trace the contour of the edge of the pot. Then I can use this to make a template of a wing. I want to draw a bat wing, and once I've refined the shape I'll cut it out, and then I can use this to trace onto the clay so that I will make sure that I get two identical wings. I've added a little bit more clay and I'm going to roll it out to the same thickness as I used for the ears, and then I'm going to cut out only one wing at the moment. Wait for that wing to completely dry before I cut out the other one and attach that. Again, I'll use a little water to smooth the edges. Then I'm going to use my palette knife to mark some lines on the wing. I want to attach this to the side of the pot, and I'm going to use some Collall bookbinding glue to help it to attach. I'll apply the glue to the edge of the wing and then I'm going to place it onto the pot. Just make sure it's in position. I'll hold it there just until it gets enough of a grab. Then I'll use a box just to prop it up until it dries. Once the wing had thoroughly dried on the pot, I repeated the whole process, except that I reversed the template to complete the other wing. I applied the glue and propped it up using a box to help it to set. I'm going to make a second pot, and this time I've tinted the Aqua Cast with a black pigment. And once that's set, I will be ready to demould that. I have some more clay, and I'm going to use my rolling pin to roll it out to, again, the same thickness as the rim of the pot. I'm just going to create a straight edge, but I need to cut another 2 ears. So again, 2 triangles, and I will attach them to the top of the pot in the same way that I did on the previous one. I'll just dampen the pot just to help it bond, and then smooth it into place. And I'll do the same for the other ear. I'm smoothing it out with my fingers, trying to make the join as smooth as possible so that you don't notice the transition between the clay and the pot. Now I have some kitchen foil, and I'm just going to tear off a chunk. Then I can fold it in half and make a kind of sausage just by scrunching it together. I'm compressing the ends and pushing and squeezing, trying to create a long sausage type shape. And then I am bending some curves. This is going to be a tail, and I'm making the armature, which I'm going to now cover with the clay. So I'll unwrap that from the baby wipe. That's where it's been keeping fresh. And I'll pull off some pieces, a little piece at a time, and then I'm going to try and form a flat skin over the kitchen foil. Just pushing the clay together and forming a layer of it over the surface. Again, using the water to smooth it and help to join all the different pieces together. So I want to keep covering it with the clay and make sure that all of the foil is covered, and that there are no thin pieces or any areas where it might poke through. So I've just got this last little piece to cover up. And it's still bendable, you can still bend it at the moment, so you need to be careful that I'm not going to bend it too far out of shape. It is quite solid. I'm just trying to get it as smooth as possible, make sure it's all covered. Then I can hold it to the pot and make sure that it follows the contours. I'm just going to squish the bottom because I want the tail to sit and form on the table. And then check its positioning. And once I'm happy with the shape and it looks pretty good, then I need to leave that to completely dry before I can add some more clay to its surface. Before I can do that, I need to mix up some paste. So I've got some scraps of the clay, and I've just put it in a jar with some water. and I'm using a lolly stick just to smush it against the sides of the jar and mix it into the water to create a paste or a kind of slip. You can do this with any of the scraps that you have left over or fresh clay. If it dries out over time, which it does if you don't cover it properly, you can add more water to it, or if you need it thicker, just add a little bit more clay. This still needs a little bit more mixing to get rid of any of the lumps. You can see the type of paste that I'm getting. So I'm just going to carry on and make it smooth, and then it'll be ready to use. Okay, my pot is dry, and I'm sure you can tell that it's a bat. So you can see that there are very small gaps just down where the wings are joined, and that's what I'm going to use this paste for, just to fill those gaps and make it look a little bit more seamless, just to give it some added strength as well. So I'm just scooping up some of the paste with a palette knife. Then I'm going to scrape it into the cracks. I like to use my fingers. You do you. I just work better with my fingers. So I'm just going to keep pushing it and fill the cracks. I'm using a baby wipe to take off anything I don't want. This will save me any sanding later on. So I'll carry on filling in, making it look a little bit more seamless. Then it needs to dry again before I can paint it. Okay, the tail is now dry, and I'm going to use the paste to give this another layer, just to try and smooth out the lumps and bumps that might be on there. I can also use it to add some texture, but also use it just to add another layer, just to make sure that there is enough covering the foil, but I don't want it to be as thick as I would probably get if I just lay some of the clay over it. So I'm using my finger, as I say, I like to do that, and smooth a skin over the surface. Make sure it's all covered, and then once I'm happy with the coverage, I leave it to dry. And this is what it looks like once it has dry. You can see it's become much whiter. I'm going to use a little bit of sandpaper to try and take off the worst of it, but I'm just going to put my dust mask on. As I've said before, you do really need to use dust masks when you are sanding any kind of clay or using eco powders. Right, so I'm sanding this down just to take off the worst of the lumps and the bumps, and I don't want to do it too vigorously because I need to keep that curve, so I'll keep checking to make sure that it still fits the pot. That's the way I'm going to glue it. I want a close fit so that the glue holds, so I'll just carry on and make it as smooth as possible, or as smooth as I would like, and I'm not going to be too fussy. It's meant to be a hairy tail, so it will have some texture. I'm just going to place my pot in this ring. It's just a roll of tape, and I'm ready to stick my tail on. I'm going to use B7000 glue, and I will put quite a lot on the inside of the tail, just along the curve. And I just want to make sure I seal this so it doesn't dry out. Before I stick that on, I'm going to tear off a few pieces of painter's tape. Then I can stick that onto the tail and position the tail in place and use the painter's tape to stick it down. Then I'll turn it round so that gravity can hold it in place, and I will use some more strips of the painter's tape just to hold it on until this glue sets. It sets enough within 45 minutes, but it does take about 24 hours to completely dry. The glue's dried now, and I took the tape off. I've just got a piece of the glue sticking out, so I'm just going to use sandpaper to remove that. As you can see, it's coming off quite nicely. That will do. And now I'm going to use this paste again, the same paste. You can see it's a little bit stiffer now. It's been drying for a little bit, but it's fine. So I'm going to use that to fill the gap down the side of the tail. Just pushing it into the gap and using the spatula to scrape off the excess. I can also use it to fill any of the big holes that are around the bottom. Again, I resorted to my finger. I don't really know why I have so many tools. I always end up using my fingers anyway. So I carried on smoothing it over the surface, filling in the worst of the holes. Once it was dry, I gave it a good sanding with a fine grit sandpaper. This was a chance to smooth out any of the rough edges. And then I brushed away the dust. And it also gave me a chance to help blend in any of the joins along the top and smooth out the ears. I did the same with the bat, trying to remove any of the fingerprints that might have been there and making sure that there were no sharp edges. Okay, I'm ready to paint my pots now. I'm using Mars Black acrylic paint. I'm just going to put some in a little pot here and mix up a tiny bit of water. This is quite thick paint, so I've just to make it a little bit more free flowing. And then I'm going to use a brush to paint the pots, which is why I didn't really need to add any pigment to this Aqua Cast. So I'm painting this pot inside and out, and Aqua Cast accepts paint really well. I may only need to give it one coat. You can see how dark it is, but I'll leave it to dry and I'll see if it needs another coat. I did the same to the bat, except I only painted the outside. I do want to actually put a plant in this, so I will seal it with an acrylic sealer on the inside, but I won't put any paint in there. And this too covered so well that it really only needed one coat. So here it is dry, and I made two small eyes using a cabochon mould and some red mica powder with some UV resin. And I'm just going to use some B7000 glue just to stick those on. Now I need to make some eyes for my cat. So I have this cabochon mould and I think this size will do. I'm going to use some UV resin for this. So I'm just going to part fill each of these moulds and set them with my UV lamp. Now I'm just going to use a Sharpie and I'll zoom in here, and I'm just going to draw a line, a pupil on each of the eyes. That'll do. And now I'm mixing some glitter, some gold glitter, very fine gold glitter with the UV resin. And I'll use my micro brush stick just to drop some of that to the back. And then I'll cure that. And that's time to demould them. That's one. That's two. And this is what they're going to look like. So I just need to stick these on now, and I'll use the same glue, but he needs a face. So back to the Das clay, and I'll take a chunk out, mix it all up. Darn it. So I'm just going to roll it into a sausage. That way I can try and cut some pieces and make sure that I get two lumps that are the same size. So I'll cut that in half, roll that into little balls, and I'm just going to squish them together and flatten them a little bit. That gives me two cheeks, and I'm going to use the bookbinding glue to stick them on with. And I'm just smoothing it over with some water. So I need to make a nose now. So I've just taken a tiny bit of clay and I'm going to squash it into a triangle on top of the cheeks. Give him some nostrils with my stick. But now I know where to put the eyes. So I can just glue those on and then everything needs to dry. Now it's ready for some paint, so I'm just mixing up a pale pink with some acrylic paints and giving him a pink nose. Just unplug the nostrils. And then I will use the black just to try and get some kind of a fade on top of the nose and paint all of the cheeks. And here's the final result. I've just stuck some fake flowers in it for effect, but I really think it's cute. I'm looking forward to finding the perfect plant to put inside it, and I love those spooky red eyes. I gave both of them a coat of acrylic varnish, several coats of acrylic varnish. I love the cat's nose, the bright pink. Here's a close-up view of the cat and the bat. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and check out the rest of the playlist for the Halloween collaboration in the description box below. Thanks for watching. Bye.